Awesome. Okay. Does that look good now? Nice. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the sort of bonus week for Intro to Android. Today we'll be going over some like excursion into the Android job market, which is certainly a little exciting for uh Intro to Android like prospects, I suppose, when it comes to how you might want to convert this towards like internship offers and stuff like that. For some quick announcements beforehand. We'll have for Wednesday, what we're planning to do is to have like a sort of Android interview question, like a very difficult or as difficult as you'd probably imagine, like MVVM state management-ish question. We put this, or I put it on the textbook. I don't think I published it yet, but that's what we're probably looking to do. Just something that's like probably very hard, and sort of going over the problem with you guys. And I guess like it'll also give you some other topics that you could get questions about, although we won't explicitly test that, or like that won't be in the question. Hopefully, anyways, this would give you some prep as to like what the difficulty you might see in like a interview Jetpack Compose question, like what that difficulty would look like. Um, so yeah, come to Wednesday, and that will also give you like some bonus points if you'd like, if that sounds incentivizing in any form. Let's see. Also, Hack Challenge midpoint submissions due tonight on CMS. This is like required for Hack Challenge eligibility, although it doesn't affect your grade in this course. You'll still want to submit on our CMS, and then from there, I think we can give you like grading comments and whatnot. But yeah, for like Hack Challenge eligibility only, and this is not impacting your final grade. And finally, A6 is due in 1 week from now at the end of the day. That's actually on a Monday, so that you have time to like finish up Hack Challenge stuff first. Okay, but going into our agenda, which hopefully is maybe more exciting than the other Intro to Android weeks, but nonetheless, we'll be going over sort of just like some words on software engineering, like hiring in general, then going more specifically into Android job market, like how the prospects are looking for like the Android roles and whatnot, mobile engineering roles. And finally, what you can do, some like small tips, not really organizers in any particular way, for how to get like an Android, how to land an Android role and stuff like that. Okay, so first thing, something we're all too familiar with. Hopefully, we've been starting with this, or unfortunately, we've probably all been starting with this. Some stuff with like sweet hiring. So yeah, well, we'll start anyways this whole presentation with like a brief rundown of how like software engineering hiring stuff works. And so some things we'll be going over, like internships versus full-time, big tech, which is like the dream, I guess, versus startups, and timelines and what expectations you might want to have for yourself. As a disclaimer, I personally only had internships for like robotics and Android. I should may say like specifically, not just like front end, but Android specifically. And so I don't know like too much about all like the other bajillion different roles you can have. But I guess that's just a quick disclaimer. So of course, internships versus full-time. I guess this is like very basic information that you might or are likely you already know, but obviously internships are for a summer, full-time is for like a indefinite full-time position. As a result, though, internships have like far fewer rounds of interviews, maybe like one behavioral, one technical, even at really big companies. Full-time can go way higher, something like, I don't know, 6, 7 rounds of interviews, which is like unbelievable, and have definitely a lower bar for hiring, internships that is. And like what is nice is that you like landing a good internship is nice because you can just get a return offer so that you don't have to do like 7 rounds of interviews, which is what I was definitely aiming for because I don't want to do 7 rounds of interviews. I really don't like doing that. And so certainly return offers are nice, and that it allows you to skip like the full-time sort of way more intense hiring stuff. Internships also don't require you to know that much, which is nice, especially for something like Android if you're kind of new to it. The goal mainly is to see how well you pick stuff up, how willing you are to learn, like the questions you ask, how you perform on new tasks, stuff like that. And so this is nice because even if you don't know something like Android that well, usually recruiters don't really care that much. I don't know if I talked about this too much, but also, like I mentioned before that I had a robotics internship and I knew literally nothing about robotics, and they were just like, "Oh, I that's fine, we'll teach you." right? And that's not something you'd likely see on like a full-time offer, and that's instead what you'd be more likely to see from like an internship. So even if you don't know like the absolute front to back of Android, for example, that is usually fine. And as long as you are somebody who's like willing to learn, that's what people hirers are usually looking for. Okay, and so moving on to like big tech versus startups. So big tech is like the dream, right? Here's some like general info about that that I think would be good to tell you guys because I don't think anyone told me this from like a at least what I think is like a practical perspective on this thing, on this stuff. That what I would have really liked to know. So big tech hiring window is like really stupidly early. You're gonna hear some like biased language here because I think this hiring process is kind of dumb, but whatever. Some even start like the summer before, and so if you're looking for a role in or like openings for interns starting in the 2025 summer, some of these companies even start hiring in the 2024 summer, which is like unbelievable. Um, as a or in comparison, startup hiring windows are just like smaller companies in general will commonly start hiring only like 1 or 2 months before the job start date, and that's like they'll start hiring in that area in that window. So like March, April, or even like now, it's nearing the end of April, only becoming like almost becoming May, and companies will absolutely still be hiring interns, especially like the smaller ones. And yeah, smaller companies like a fall somewhere ish in between. So yeah, right. Big tech is the dream, but what should you expect for yourself? So I have some slides here that at least go on a little bit of a tangent on why this dream might not be necessary, or at least to help you set expectations for yourself. One, we are at an Ivy League, and so these will start going into things that are like a little like flow of logic things that again I would like to have been told myself as a freshman, sophomore, blah blah blah. The Cornell student body is definitely not representative of like the average human population or like the software engineering population, certainly. One, the people around you will likely be getting really good offers. But even if they aren't getting really good offers, which is often the case, you'll because like Ivy League students are very performative comparative to other people, you'll almost definitely like only hear about people getting the really big offers. Like, oh, did you hear that XYZ got Apple at like Sui intern? Those are the only things you'll hear because those are the only people that Ivy League people care about, if that makes sense. So just in summary, if you are an Ivy League student, which everyone here is and probably is online, that means they got into Cornell, and in order to get into Cornell, they have to be more like comparative and whatnot to care about their grades and stuff. And so they won't shut up about what offer somebody got. Hopefully I summed that up. Oh, and so just like in general, hopefully this allows you to like set better expectations for yourself. Because yeah, it might seem like everybody is getting incredibly insane offers, but indeed, I have never worked at big tech and I've just been rejected every single time, for example, and that's fine. Even though that is not the kind of story that you'll generally hear. Something weird also is that some companies, this is not specifically for Android in any form, but some companies really love like bulk hiring interns from Ivy Leagues for some reason. The most infamous example is the crude logo that I've put together there because I didn't actually want to put it on here just in case I would get like flagged or something. But maybe you can recognize what that's supposed to represent. And then most like these companies will like not return offer the vast majority of them. And so if anything, even if you get like an actual offer from a smaller company, be grateful for your return offer because even if a bunch of people are saying like, oh, I got, or like, did you hear like so many people are getting interns at that company or others, that might not actually become an like a return offer in the vast majority of cases for big tech companies, right? Two, there's always perhaps smaller fish. So there's a reason big tech is really big tech. And so this is something that I hear a lot and like definitely experienced myself. Very commonly people will start like stressing or freaking out that they hadn't gotten an offer by something like December. And so if you're a sophomore, like I was doing in my first time, like in the intern search or whatever, like it was December, maybe like January, February rolling around, and oh my gosh, I could not find anything. I had no offer, no like interviews or anything at that time, even though I was searching for so long. Well, there are so many companies that like besides big tech that will start hiring like 4, 3 to even like 1 month, like even now before start. In fact, the only companies that can like afford ish or have the resources to start hiring like in advance, like December slash like even before that, the only companies that can like start even hiring by this time are like big tech companies. Um, and the reason for that being is that like big tech has an inhumanly large amount of like human resources, hiring data, and blah blah blah. And so these are the only companies that can actually afford to start hiring in this time. Other companies, like smaller companies, can only like really hire much later in the process because they only know how many like people they will even need for each team at that point, let alone have all these resources to do that hiring so early on. Um, and so certainly if you're like a sophomore or freshman, I say this, or certainly even a junior, then you certainly like do not need to focus on getting like massive big tech internship. Literally getting anything is very good. And certainly later on in the process, things qualifiable as like anything start popping up way more often. And anecdotally, personally, I got a robotics internship my sophomore summer, even though I don't ever plan to do it again. It was just a nice offer to have to like put on the resume. At least if I was a sophomore, right? Um, Perhaps also to juniors and seniors out there, what obviously you might be wondering, what if I didn't get my dream offer? Well, this goes on to my final little tangent about career and in general. You keep growing after college. And so college students seem to act like they'll die shortly after graduation, meaning that they sort of have to maximize the best thing possible immediately for post grad. They have to get like the best offer now, and then if they don't, life is just over. Um, but in actuality, there's so much room for growth outside of college after you graduate. This is not something that people say here, and it's kind of only something you hear once you start asking people who have like been working for a while. Um, for example, like I could ask this to my mentor at Robinhood, and you would say very much the same things. You have a whole career ahead of you. You don't need the best offer because you can absolutely keep working towards it if that's something that matters to you after college. Um, and it's kind of nice because after college, you also don't have to be taking like a bunch of different classes and take curriculars and deal with a bunch of drama and survive Ithaca, etc. Right? Um, Life after college is a lot easier to like secure a job and just have these sorts of job search things going, right? Here's a quick tip in terms of job search. For like a very like probably one of the most like practical tips I could give. Finding a single resource with a ton of job listings kind of sucks. Like I think these other job boards like Indeed, Glassdoor, whatever, like they're just really all over the place. They don't have anything organized. Use these like job lists. There's one for like simplified jobs slash summer 2025. This is like a GitHub list. I can probably actually click into this and just show you what it looks like. And it's much nicer than everything else because it just has like a bunch of software jobs and you see how little this thing is moving. It has like everything on here. Like these are, I'm pretty sure, just like other software people like putting PRs on this list and like adding them. And if we'll talk about this more in a second, but if you want to find like Android listings, for example, the Control F takes so long. But yeah, I mean, there's only 12 on this entire list, but you can just Control F Android and like apply to these in particular to hopefully get like a better chance at those. Not that there are very many of those, which we'll talk about in a second. Why is this gonna? There we go. Presumably they'll make one also for 2026. So even if it's perhaps a little late to be thinking or considering ish about like 2025, which is arguable, they'll likely make one for 2026 as well.
It'll be the same link. The 2024 one was changed into the 2025 one.
Oh, I see. And they just like changed
Yeah,
the
they just
repo
changed the
or whatever.
name. Yeah.
I see. I see. Well, if you bookmark that repo, then it'll be like the same thing. Also, something that was really practical, again, practical tip, nice for me, to use simplified autofill applications because like a big strategy for tech hiring is like, I mean, what you might want to call like shotgun applying. This is at least something that I had to do. I don't know if anybody else has better success than this, but big strategy for me is just applying to anything and everything because so many, like maybe literally like 99% or more of applications literally just get discarded at probably the first round. And so Well, if you apply to everything, you only need a few pellets to hit the target in order for the method to be effective, right? So, I mean, having a little extension here, like simplified to just autofill your applications, is a big deal and saves a lot of time. Okay, any quick questions about that stuff? Pretty general stuff for like software engineering hiring, but any questions about any of that? Okay, if not, and there's also nothing online, it seems, we can go perhaps more into the Android job market, particularly. This is talking. This is kind of an aside about how like sort of convincing that the Android job market is indeed good. And then the last section will be more about like more practical tips. But for now, we'll have a discussion about the Android job market. Warning speculation. Well, some of these slides are like not actual reinforced, like I can't point to a fact and have this be true. And so any slide that has that icon in the corner is purely speculation, let's say. But first, I mean, a big question you might be wondering yourself is iOS versus Android, like the iOS versus Android job market. One of my greatest realizations over my couple of years, like witnessing iOS Android hiring, not because I haven't done any iOS hiring myself. I don't know iOS, but I've definitely seen like some. I've heard a lot about like iOS Android hiring and been through Android hiring myself. And so I've noticed, and again, this is speculation. Don't like quote me on this, but Android is an incredibly better job market than iOS, at least of as of 2025. Like it's not even close. It's like way, way better. Um, so here are some anecdotes for kind of like illustrating my point. So I've seen at companies that I've interned at that iOS engineers have been moved to Android with absolutely zero Android experience because they need people to do Android and just they have nobody applying or nobody like I suppose, who applies who is good enough, who knows Android. And so mobile iOS engineers who don't know Android will just be moved over to Android with no experience, like what is happening there. Big tech at that company that maybe is recognizable by that letter has hired to Android roles with absolutely zero Android experience again. And this is a big tech company. You might expect that they have a lot of applications, and certainly somebody there would know Android for them to hire them into an Android role, but I mean, seemingly not. Um, and certainly, I have also noticed that Android interviews are just straight up easier compared to iOS interviews. And, and there have been anecdotes of people like literally acing iOS interviews and not getting an offer, which is kind of terrible if you think about it versus Android. If you do well, then you'll just like, yeah, then if you do well, you do well, right? Which is probably how you would expect it to do or how you would expect it to go. Why is this? Definitely a good question. Here's my like take if you need more or hopefully this also like convinces you a little bit more from like a logical perspective why iOS is so much worse of a job market. Two things: equal demand, and way more supply compared to Android in terms of like the OS market share, if that makes sense. OS market share, but demand or OS market share in the idea of demand, but way more supply in the idea of engineers. So let's break that down. Equal demand. So when we're thinking about demand, we're thinking about like Android users, right? Android, like the people who own an Android phone. And so like if a lot of people own an Android phone, then companies would want to develop for it, right? And so Android market share as a phone, as like people using Android phones, is roughly equal to iOS. This is a market share worldwide, and worldwide, Android actually has more market share compared to iOS. And so if there's any company that is looking to develop apps like not for the US at like internationally, I suppose, they will much more likely be looking to develop for at least hope to open the market up to Android. Um, and like I will admit that this graph is more flipped when it comes to only the US. And so if you have like a startup or whatever who's focused like solely on the United States market, they'll probably want to target iOS first, but it's still roughly like equal. I think it's like maybe 40% as of 2025. And perhaps this graph may trend in the coming years to be flipped more towards iOS. It's unclear exactly, I'm not sure. But at least as of now and as of certainly the past many years, this has been like a roughly equal market. Okay, there's a lot of speculation here, so bear with me. But I think that there's way, way, way more supply when it comes to iOS developers compared to Android developers. So this is not talking about people who own the phone. This is talking about like people who develop for iOS or Android. There are so many more iOS developers, and it's nuts. Almost nobody does Android or like knows Android, but here and like it might be weird, right? Like, oh, if the world is split like sort of 50-50 on Android versus iOS, why are so many people developing for iOS? Here's my take on why. Again, lots of speculation, but if you are looking for a software engineer intern job, that probably means that you have like college or some other formal education, which likely means, anyways, that you have like a higher or of a higher socioeconomic status if you're going to go to like college and whatnot, right? Likely also means that you have more disposable income, which means you buy more higher-end products, which also means you probably buy iOS over Android for yourself. And then because you have because you have an iOS phone, you make the split second decision that like, oh, I guess I'll develop for iOS, even though you can download Android Studio regardless of your platform. And so you develop almost on a knee-jerk reaction for iOS and therefore learn iOS development instead. This one little jump in logic is almost like it's a very like naive decision of just like I guess I have an Android or I have an iOS phone. I guess I'll develop for it without really thinking about the consequences. Why? That alone creates this sort of massive like discrepancy between iOS and Android developers simply because, oh, I guess I have an iPhone, which I almost did as well, but think uh, I had a Mac, or I did not have a Mac. I do not like Macs, and so I could not download Xcode, and so I didn't download like or I didn't start developing for iOS. I just started developing for Android on my own. But the vast majority of people, especially if they have an iPhone, will just want to develop for iOS without really considering this job market stuff because it's not really told to you. And therefore, just as a result of this discrepancy is quite large, but of like iOS versus Android developers. Either way, even if like that is not necessarily the case, because it is just speculation, but I definitely noticed that at least something is going on, and I'm pretty sure that is why. I've definitely noticed that Android is way easier to get a job for, even if I don't know the reason. Like that's just kind of the cut, plain and simple. Does that mean you'll get one without trying? Absolutely not. You still have to be good, maybe even like the best of the developers, in order to get like an Android job, especially at like a prestigious company. You definitely still have to know your stuff, right? But I mean, the sad thing is, even if you're the best at iOS, you still might not get the job, which is kind of terrible to think about, as opposed to Android, a lot more, again, cut, super dry, where if you are very, very good at Android, well, you should get the job, right? So stick with Android, perhaps. Okay. Um, so again, this is okay. This started talking about the like stuff I was showing on the job board. Android specific listings on job boards are kind of rare. You saw that on that list of probably like 1,000 or more listings. There were only like 12 actual like Android specific listings. Android specific listings, therefore, are kind of rare. An Android job posting is how I got my current like or my previous internship and eventually like return offer. But you might not find many. Some companies might post like mobile engineering roles, like generally, which generally like also encompass Android. It's just like iOS or Android. They'll just lump it together into like mobile roles. There might also be like front end engineer roles that also encompass mobile, but those are also somewhat rare. Did I talk about it more? Yeah, with that said, you'll want to keep applying just like in general to like general software engineering roles, just like no matter what like specific thing you are in. Many companies, especially like the bigger tech companies, will still hire Android devs through just like the general software application. And so certainly if you have like Android in your as like a keyword-ish in your resume, that will still be recognized since companies like yeah, even if they hire through like the general application, will still be hiring like hopefully Android engineers like more specifically from that pool. I think there was one more thing I wanted to say. Uh, yeah, maybe not. I guess like the uh, We'll look at that in a second. Um, uh, I think the idea though is that certainly you'd want to apply to like Android specific listings when they come up because like not very many people will be applying to them as a result of like not many people knowing Android. And so if you know Android, like definitely make sure to apply to one of these because it had like a much higher chance of you getting bumped up as opposed to like a general application, right? Unfortunately, I hope that logo doesn't like spark fear into anyone. It kind of sparks fear into me, but even Android specific jobs will often have a leak code component. Not great, sorry to say that, but certainly smaller companies and startups are less likely to like care about leak code components and much more likely to just like hope that you or like test or hope that you know like Android very specifically might not even give you a leak code component. But yeah, certainly like Robinhood, for example, when I was going through the process, has leak code component, and certainly anything like larger than that also would have leak code. And if you apply for like a general software application or yeah, a general software application, they probably wouldn't even give you like an Android technical at all. It would likely just be leak code, which is kind of weird. I don't like how that is structured, but that's kind of unfortunately how it is. Um, One note also about hiring. This is kind of unrelated from the previous things. It's not really a natural progression, but quick side note, I guess, about Android native. Older companies and code bases like I felt this was important, at least information to know when it comes to hiring. Is older companies will sometimes use what is known as Android native or like native Android. Somewhere they'll just throw the word native in there. This is an older version of Android programming or like Android development that used like XML files, like basically actual raw text files to um, that was like not really programming and imperative programming, which is more of like take a text field and say dot text equals something to change the text in like one line, as opposed to like the Jetpack Compose state stuff that we've been learning. It uses like Android native uses imperative programming and it's older and very outdated. It sucks. And so now newer companies and code bases will use primarily like Jetpack Compose, and even like the Android documentation has like very, very, very strongly recommended just like completely making Android native like entirely obsolete because it is just like it holds almost no purpose in terms of development anymore in favor of Jetpack Compose. The only exception being these older code bases that are kind of just ingrained there. And so yeah, again, this is often like a big company, like big tech versus startup question. So if it's big tech, they're an older company, they've probably been around for a while, and therefore uh they're more likely to still use native because they have like a bunch of old code lying around. Jetpack Compose being a newer framework only like is around if there were companies to like write code for that sort of now. Versus small companies are obviously more likely to move faster and also might just be newer companies and are much more likely to use Jetpack Compose. Either way, though, even if you only know Jetpack Compose and are applying to a company that only cares about Android native, they probably still hire you or probably still very strongly consider you. Definitely make sure to ask before like a technical interview if you have one specifically for Android, like an Android project interview. If it's like native only, or if you have the option between native or Jetpack Compose. And make sure to certainly note if you don't know native that you are much stronger in Jetpack Compose. And it's often like that's often fine because Compose is like way more important nowadays. Um, and so like I guess if it's native only, which is like definitely rare, definitely companies I don't think are doing that anymore very commonly, but I suppose I would recommend just like quickly self-studying native, ask like ChatGPT to give you like a project idea or something. It would be unfortunate, and I don't think that they would put that much consideration into it, or they would consider the fact that you still know Compose and put that very strongly. But in that event, maybe self-studying would be a good idea. But otherwise, it's not like it's definitely not an important skill to know, in my opinion. Um, I guess one. Let's see. A final note. Yeah, the general idea why, if you're wondering why, I don't know if it's sitting on the slide, why like Google is like strongly recommending Compose over native. The idea is that it like very very highly accelerates like programming. You can just develop screens like far more quickly in this like declarative paradigm. Um, and as a result, even the older companies and code bases and whatnot, like all of these code bases are encouraged to eventually migrate over to Compose, which is why even if a company is kind of like majority native right now, they'll likely still be looking for people who know Compose so that that migration can at least eventually occur. Okay, any questions about any of that? Just sort of Android specific job market shenanigans, stuff like that. Any questions online too? Seems not. In which case we will go forward onto some hopefully more helpful, grounded, like Android resume prep tips, stuff like that. So what can you do to get an Android job? Um, so I guess this is my tips on like how you might want to build up your resume, I suppose, to like Android. Android definitely is like very, very experience based. It's not too or I think like course and like studying and stuff like that. Um, or just like listing it as a skill alone might not mean as much as having actual experience and like real projects that you've built, which I think are your best bet for sure. Since even like if even if you theoretically knew Android and like Jetpack Compose, syntax, all that stuff front to back from a coding perspective, just like knowing your way around Android Studio, like what buttons to click, things like that, how to resolve Gradle build errors when they come up, those things only come from experience. And so certainly if you have like a technical interview and something like weird error pops up, knowing how to resolve that is largely only something that you'd get out of experience. Um, and so yeah, experience is probably your best bet, but because of everything we've talked about with like how rare Android experience is, even just a little bit of Android experience goes a long way for sure. Um, as a quick note to those taking the course, your hack challenge project can absolutely be like put on your resume. So definitely good incentive to like put a good amount of effort into that so that it becomes like a nice resume piece. Um, and as we said before, it adds a lot to see that you've made an app from scratch for sure. To like put on your resume as like an Android developer, since it gives you that experience. So this might be something you want to do on your own or even continue your Hack Challenge project with. Self-publishing an app to the Google Play Store is also a great way to show like your interest or like your drive experience also in Android. Um, I think it costs like $100, which is kind of annoying, but to like get the Google publishing license. But the bright side is that you don't even really need like a massive user base, like a massive like daily active user, monthly active user number to just put up like flop on the resume. Just publishing, like the act of publishing an app, knowing that you have been through that process, since it is kind of tedious, like knowing how to take an app the from Android Studio, like build it in such a way that it can be shipped and like going through all that process is something that companies would definitely want you to know, because certainly at some point a company would want you to like publish it actually on the Play Store, and just having experience like publishing stuff to the like Play Store definitely adds a lot for you. Um, and also if you publish the app, that means that you've certainly like gone through the hoops of like building an app completely front to back as opposed to just like having a little facade of an app that kind of works that a recruiter might not know if that's actually a fully fleshed out app, right? And having a fully fleshed out app versus like a facade takes a lot more time. Perhaps that little 20% extra development that needs to go like that full length for you to actually take an app from just being a project to then publishing it might take like 80% of the work, right? Getting that like little 20% layer of polish. So definitely like publishing an app to the Play Store adds a lot to your resume. And so when it comes to like verbal interview questions, you'll definitely get like a lot of questions for like your projects and experience that you'll be asked in like I guess some more I guess it would be considered like a behavioral portion of a interview, but definitely like more technical questions of like the behavioral interview. So when like recruiters or whatever will look at your resume, they'll very often talk about like projects and experience that you have when at least particularly when it comes to Android. And certainly if you've been like very involved and remember like very deeply the process of making a project, there's hardly an easier question to answer than one about like a project that you really deeply remember making, right? Um, and so, for example, you might get questions like these. These are just like random examples. This is not something that I would recommend like you necessarily prepare on, but just a general idea. Like, what was the hardest part about developing this blank project? What did you like most about developing this project? What was the conflict? That's probably a big one on that. When you were developing this app or like with this team or whatever, how did you resolve it? Could you describe more about what you did on blank? Like literally just questions that they'll ask to get more information about what you did or like your experience on a particular project or experience. And again, these are like super easy to answer if you were generally genuinely passionate and involved in that project. Hopefully that encourages you to be more passionate also about like your hack challenge project and more involved in that stuff, hopefully. But certainly these are very easy questions to answer and questions that they'll ask a lot about, especially since projects and experience are very important for like Android resumes. Quick plug, what's a great way to get Android project and team experience? You might want to join a project team. Applying to app dev, obviously, great way to get Android experience, especially more so for mobile dev. And I'll have a few slides explaining why, especially for mobile dev, right? Because mobile is like somewhat difficult to get into. It's hard to have a platform where you have like a really large user base from the get-go. I think I published an app to the Play Store like a long time ago, and just like literally nobody downloaded it because I don't want to like pay for marketing and like advertisements and stuff like that. Nor do I know how to do marketing and advertisements and whatnot. And so hard to get certainly like people to actually download and use your app. Also hard to assemble an entire team for mobile. Like while you might be able to build like a some sort of like back end like machine learning thing on your own if you just know that. Mobile is hard to get into because it needs like skills from a lot of different disciplines to build like a fully fleshed out app. You'll want a back end, front end, and even if you know that, even if like you know like all if you or if you even if you can be like a full stack developer, you still need like nice Figma designs. And after that, in order to get a user base, you need like marketing, stuff like that. Hard to assemble that entire team, and certainly very hard to do that all yourself. Um, and generally, like there are a lot of apps out there, and it's pretty hard to get like an original sort of good app idea that's not already done. App dev gives you sort of solves all of that problem, all those problems by giving you a great large user base for like the Cornell campus. Obviously, like other people on these different sub teams from all these different disciplines, and hopefully, I hope we have good app ideas. I hope so. But certainly a good user base in terms of apps such as like Eatery, for example. Uh, Quick disclaimer, because I felt like it would probably be necessary to say this. The Android app dev interview isn't easier, not necessarily easier than the iOS like sub-team interview specifically for app dev. We want people who care and are very good, of course, passionate and driven. Um, and so, if you were wondering, like, oh, iOS job interview for internships and stuff seems a lot easier. Is the same for app dev? Certainly, we hope not, and certainly not necessarily, since we want people who are very skilled and whatnot. But certainly, having taken Intro to Android puts you at the sort of forefront of applicants, since it shows you have strong interest, perhaps in the team, strong technical ability through the course and whatnot, Android knowledge. And so, we would strongly encourage you, if you're taking this class, to apply for sure. Okay, wait, yeah, that's all I have there. Any questions about that? I have like one more sort of summary slide after that, but any questions about any of that? Also like app dev stuff's like cool to ask, but yeah, any questions? Okay, cool. If we have nothing, again, I think I have one more slide at the end here. So a little like very quick like summary slide, what you can do yourself to get an Android job. Um, so like again, what can you do perhaps for an Android career? You can make a great hack challenge project, a good like great resume piece and experience, since that stuff is certainly very important for Android like resume, Android like job listings in general. It's like experience actually building something. Two, you can build some like personal project apps, and especially building something from scratch like is a great learning process. It's sort of one thing to be able to look at like existing code and build off of it and like use examples, reference examples and whatnot. But like building from scratch really helps you like fundamentally understand where all of the pieces, like why all of the pieces of the puzzle exist. Um, and so certainly building an app like completely from scratch is like a wonderful learning experience. Um, if you've built some personal project apps or would like to continue further with your Hack Challenge project, if everyone on your team's okay with that, you can publish an app to the Play Store. This is certainly like an even better resume piece. Shows extra Android initiative if you want to take that extra step. Certainly, also you could apply to Apta. Amazing resume piece. Personally, I think app dev, like just having that on my resume has generated like so many questions from interviewers. Like, oh, I saw you had this little app development group on your resume. Can you tell me more about that? Like, they'll ask a lot of questions about this for sure. It shows it's a wonderful place to learn. Obviously, meet a lot of great people, build connections and stuff, and creates more opportunities in that regard. But certainly gives you like lots of talking points and great experience that recruiters will be very keen to like point out because it gives you a platform to have like an actual team developing apps, which is not something that or is a very different learning experience from developing something purely as a solo developer on your own. So this definitely like a very standout thing for like interviews and whatnot that they'll like to ask questions about and stuff. Um, and finally, in order to prep for your interviews, you can certainly just like the best thing you can do, I think by far is just build stuff. So like building an app, because Android interview questions are like rarely arbitrary. They're usually quite hands-on and quite practical. Like they'll ask you to do um, very realistic stuff, maybe debug real things or like just network, like literally just do networking, which is like well, if you certainly built an app and like used retrofit and whatnot, you would just be able to do it. Um, and to get some extra, hopefully prep for interviews and interviews, we have that interview question for demo on Wednesday. And again, that's like that one. This we're looking to make it like quite difficult to hopefully like show the absolute maybe upper limit of what you might expect from an Android question, but. Uh, I haven't taken like that like too many Android like interview stuff. But even if that one question isn't particularly like encompassing of all that you might see for Android interviews, we'll also give you some other topics that they might ask questions about. So that is for Demo Wednesday. Stopping point, this is the last lecture, I suppose. Take a quick second to thank you all for taking Intro to Android and also coming to the bonus week. Thank you very much. Hope you've been enjoying the course. And since this, I guess, my last semester at Cornell slash teaching this course, I'd like to thank you all quick second for taking this course. So thank you very much. Um, and uh, yeah, attendance more if you wanted bonus points. Um, I think you have the option to add some questions on the form if you would like to add if you have any like lingering questions, I can like stick around to answer. But yeah, that's all we have for today. So thank you all for coming and thanks for taking the answer. Oh yes, chat. Is it a question? You're very welcome. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll stick around, open the form in a second, but just to see if anyone has like any lingering questions. But um, yeah, apart from that, that's all we have. So everyone is free to go 5 minutes early.